Hey guys, welcome. Eric here, Driveline World's OK steering wheel holder, and today's going to be a little bit different. I've been working all weekend. I've got uh, Jim and Hopper who've been here with their trucks parked at the house all weekend. So just haven't had a chance to make a video for the main channel. Although I do have videos of the behind the scenes if you want to see everything that's in progress here. Lot of stuff in progress here. So if you want to see that, you can join the channel as a member. The link is down below with information about that. But I did do a podcast rebooting the Drive Axle show on all the podcast apps. So if you go to Spotify and you search for Drive Axle show, you'll find this full episode. But I decided that because I haven't been able to do a main video for the channel, I was going to do one. I was going to cut one of the biggest pieces out of that podcast episode for you guys here. So that's what this is going to be. So be sure and, like I said, hunt down that podcast on any of the apps you use, Drive Axle Show, if you want to listen to the whole thing. But in this clip, I wanted to talk about some of the things I've been thinking about in terms of the requiring English to have a CDL, an active CDL, not being put out of service, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to have this up for you guys to listen to until I can get back to regular videos. I got a lot of updates for you guys on the channel. Really appreciate you being patient through this process. But in this will be just audio, so you can just minimize the video, let it play in the background and listen to it. If you want to hear the whole episode, go to Spotify or any of those, check those out, and you can follow and subscribe to the podcast from there. So, all right, without further ado, here it is. Thanks so much, you guys. Make sure to subscribe if you are not already to the channel. Hit the thumbs up, leave me a comment with your thoughts below. Here we go. I've seen quite a few videos, some from some folks that I would consider a friend, and I'll be honest with you, I think some are really. I think there's a big stretch happening, a big stretch occurring to. There's a lot of partisanship around this. So, for those who aren't familiar, Trump has signed an executive order, which is essentially creating a scenario in which the existing rules, regulations, laws, etc., are being enforced, and you must display, a proficient understanding to read, write, etc., the English language to operate a commercial motor vehicle in the United States. When I first heard this, I thought this is the most common sense. Well, of course that should be the case. Of course. And look, I come at this from a very libertarian perspective. I cannot stand either party. I can't stand a Republican Party. I can't stand a Democrat Party. I don't think there's really much of anybody that can be trusted there on either side of the aisle. So I try to come at all these issues from just, not just a distaste for all of it. And when you can do that, you can see the way the two sides react. And I'm saying the electorate in general, the way the two sides react to announcements like this. And sometimes you can see how misguided or way off course those reactions are. They're based in a very partisan perspective. And I think that does a disservice. I don't think that does. I think that just creates more divisiveness and is not really healthy for the dialogue. Okay. And I'm not going to name this other YouTuber. There's a couple of them, but I'm not going to name them because I know them. But the argument when this announcement came out from those who I would say probably lean a little bit towards the left, I think I could comfortably say that, was that this was founded in anti-immigrant racism. And I found that to be quite a stretch. Is there some of that out there? Of course there is. You get out there on the road with a CB and outside of Atlanta or somewhere like that, and of course there is racism out there. There's no doubt in that. Personally, I think that it's much. I think most of us out on the road probably just view each other as drivers, right? And that's one of the things, I've mentioned this before. That's one of the things I love about trucking is that when you get to a shipper or receiver, that shipper or receiver is not looking at your profile. They're not seeing what color you are. They're seeing the truck number. Here's the truck number. Here's the load number. Here's what's going in the trailer. Here's where it's going. Here's the bills. That's it. I love that about trucking, that it's very much, hey, can you pick up the load on time? Can you deliver it on time? Can you get it there safely? That's the equation, right? It's a very level playing field, and I love that. But that doesn't mean there's not racism out there. But the argument that there's so much support for the requirement to speak English because of this anti-immigrant racist viewpoint, I think is just really reckless. I don't think that's the correct argument to be made, and I'm really saddened to see that some people who I consider, generally pretty smart people and actually have relied and leaned on them for wisdom would go out there and publicly put big YouTube videos up basically saying, hey, if you're out there championing this idea that we need proof that drivers can read, speak, understand English, that you have this anti-immigrant vibe about you. That is not true at all. That completely, in fact, in this recent, gosh, I wish I could mention the video, but in this recent video, not once in this video was safety mentioned. Not once. This was like a 45-minute video that I was watching in which the whole rant was about anti-immigrant positions and hints of racism in those views. And also this video pointed to, if you can't make money, you always have to have someone to blame. So basically saying that if someone is failing in trucking and failing in business, then they have to have a scapegoat other than themselves. So they're trying to find something to blame, and that's the crux of the issue. And I don't believe that's true at all either. But again, the one thing that wasn't mentioned in this whole video was safety. And is it possible that many, if not most of us, support this common sense, obvious thing that should be happening with English because we want our roads safer? It has nothing to do with rates and freight. Now, I'm not saying that that's not the case for a lot of people. I'm sure if you go on Facebook, which I don't have Facebook, but because it's so toxic, that you're going to see people, getting off the rails and off into the weeds on, this is why rates are so bad and yada, 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 which, there is some truth to that. I mean, obviously, the more trucks you have, the more capacity that there is. And when there's not a lot of volume or not enough volume and freight out there to equalize with that capacity, then of course that's going to have an impact. But I think the ignoring the safety part of this is you're really doing yourself a disservice. You're being dishonest about it if you're not going to talk about that part. And I think anyone with a level head and some common sense who's been paying attention to the news cycles for the last few months or years, as a matter of fact, can see that lives have been lost. Families have been destroyed. Lives have been lost because we allow people to be on the road who should not be operating a commercial motor vehicle. Now, that's not just the English requirement. That's across a lot of various, there's a lot of reasons that could be, but you can't point at it and say, oh, well, people get in car crashes all the time. We can't just fully stop it. We can't just take every single driver off the road. What if someone took some sleeping medication? What if someone did this or did that? We can't. That kind of thing happens, yes. But if you can limit it even by one, if you can save a mother, a daughter, a son, a father, just by pushing one rule and regulation that exists and that's on the books, why wouldn't you? And this isn't just one. This is many instances where people are being destroyed, families pulled apart, lives lost because of a full lack of enforcement of a pretty basic common sense policy and procedure, or the requirement to prove that you can read, write, understand, speak English. I don't know what the controversy is about that, but apparently there is one. And apparently if you think that that should be enforced, well, you're anti-immigrant and you've got, hints of racism. So it's odd to me, odd. But anyway, I wanted to take a moment to read to you one of the best, is it post? Or do we say post or tweets? Oh man, now I got to find this. Do we say post or tweets? I don't post, I think. We don't say tweets anymore. Let me find this. I just had it, and X does this thing where after a certain amount of time, you go back to the homepage and it just like pops off of what you were looking at. So it should have been on the actual post itself. But here we go. Okay, so this is from Craig Fuller. He's the president or CEO of FreightWaves. His user handle on X is Freight Alley, Alley. So be sure and look him up if you want to see his thoughts and opinions on things. I happen to like Craig Fuller. Don't know him personally. I've communicated with him through direct message, and he's reposted some of my stuff. I've reposted some of his stuff. I happen to respect him. I don't agree with everything he says. I think some of his predictions kind of leave out some variables, but that's just my opinion. I also think a lot of things that he says are very well rooted and grounded in data and proof, and he's got a lot of resources and evidence that can support a lot of the things that he says. And I listen when he talks. Okay, but I'm going to read you. It's not too long. I'm going to read you what he posted, and I think this covers all the bases here. I don't think he's off the mark in any way, shape, or form. And again, don't look at this through a Republican or a Democrat. Don't be a Democrat and be upset that Republicans are reading this, or don't be a Republican upset that a Democrat's reading this. I'm neither one, okay? I'm just coming at this from the perspective of a driver with a family. That's my only prism to look at this through. So here it is, Craig Fuller, FreightWaves. Here's his post. And I quote, "The trucking market has been in the longest and deepest downturn in history. It started in March 2022 and has put many trucking companies out of business. The goods economy has been sluggish, but the primary cause has been way too much capacity. There was an explosion of new companies into the industry during COVID, attracted to good paying rates and fueled by government stimulus/cheap credit. Unfortunately, the industry overcorrected and way too much capacity was added, causing a collapse in market rates. To fend off bankruptcy, trucking firms found the only way to survive was to cut cost. The number one expense for truckers is driver labor. It's hard to cut wages of experienced truck drivers with proper documentation, so a large number of small trucking firms resorted to hiring drivers without work permits. These workers were able to secure CDLs in the U.S. without ever passing a CDL test in the U.S. Many states honored CDLs from other foreign countries without verifying that the driver was experienced and qualified. In other words, they never demonstrated that they could drive an 80,000-pound truck safely. Not only that, but many of the folks couldn't speak or read English. Trucking became a lifeline for many immigrants. It offers steady work, a decent living, and since most truckers live out of their truck, a place to live. For most immigrants, it is a significant improvement over the abject poverty in their home countries. These undocumented workers would often work for wages below their American counterparts while tolerating poor working conditions and junky, unsafe equipment. The DOT officials, the ones that are charged with enforcement, were told to ignore the driver's CDL qualifications and not to inspect for proper work permits. They were also instructed to accommodate drivers who didn't speak English. This happened in 2016. In other words, a truck driver without proper documentation or work permit could not be placed out of service, even if the DOT official knew the driver lacked the proper credentials. This flood of unqualified and undocumented truck drivers created a flood of capacity and has kept trucking rates in the gutter, bankrupting many companies that were in full compliance and had qualified U.S. truck drivers. It has also made our highways far more dangerous, as the fatality rate increase involving heavy-duty trucks demonstrates. The Trump administration has issued new guidance to reinforce the labor, CDL, and language capabilities of truck drivers. Anyone who is caught driving a truck without proper documentation or English comprehension will be put out of service and risk being deported. While I have an enormous amount of empathy for the plight of immigrants, I recognize that this is a major safety and fairness issue for the trucking industry. I would love to see the trucking industry thrive once again and hope the executive order accomplishes that. Unquote. Okay, so he hits on, I think, everything here. I mean, he hits on the capacity part, and most importantly to me, he hits on the safety issue. And I think you can't mention one without the other. And if you're doing so, then you're doing so from a partisan perspective. You're trying to position the narrative as one rooted in racism versus positioning the narrative as one simply of, hey, this is pretty common sense stuff. If you're going to have foreigners, if you're going to have immigrants come in and not have to go through the same rigorous process that that safe drivers in the U.S. have to go through, you're going to create unsafe environments, and you're going to create an unlevel, unfair capacity environment. I don't know how, it really is that black and white. You don't have to try and muddy the waters here. It's pretty simple. And I don't think there's a lot of people who disagree with this. I think there's just a lot of people who are upset that that there's a pretty common sense, logical thing that's happening through the Trump administration, which I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of in a lot of ways. That is kind of, hitting on the immigration thing. And there's this group, I don't know if group is the right word, but certainly this voting bloc out there that its red flags go crazy if anyone makes any meaningful attempt to curb illegal immigration or unhealthy, unfair immigration into the United States, which, it's such an odd thing. I lived in New Zealand for almost a year, I want to say in 2001, going into 2002. And I'll tell you, when that visa is up, they're knocking on your door. Okay. I've been around the world. I've worked around the world. There is no other country that has the tolerance that the U.S. has. In pretty much every country that I've been in, you do not get the forgiveness anywhere close to it. So this whole thought process that the United States is being racist or unfair in trying to enforce, logical, coherent, common sense immigration policy is just absurd to me. And it's counterproductive, and it doesn't help keep our highways safe, and it doesn't help keep capacity and volume in check. And I'm not saying this because I think that this is creating problems for me in terms of rate and volume, because I pull for a contract carrier, and that contract carrier is doing just fine. That contract carrier is weathering the storm, has been. It's been tough. There's certainly been up and downs, but a lot of this spot market stuff and a lot of this lowballing cheap freight stuff doesn't really impact me. I know that may be a surprise to a lot of you that I pull freight for a mega carrier, and I'm saying that cheap freight doesn't really impact me, but you would be surprised to learn that we actually are probably hauling better paying reefer freight than a lot of you. You'd probably be surprised to know that. And I know you may argue, you may not agree, but that's for a whole other thing. But on this issue, I'm not feeling any real impact. I know a lot of drivers who do, but for me personally, it's much more about safety. I just don't want, I think having driven almost 1 million safe miles with up to 80,000 pounds on the tires that I'm in control of, I do not, in any circumstance, think that it's safe to have someone who's not qualified to be doing that. I don't want that. I think everything possible needs to be done to prohibit that from happening. That is not racist. That is not anti-immigrant to say. It is, let's do whatever is possible to ensure that anyone who's driving a combination vehicle, a commercial motor vehicle weighing 80,000 pounds, is qualified to do so safely and efficiently. There's no controversy in that. So anyway, I thought I would share that with you guys. I would really love to know your thoughts. If you want to check out my channel, you can head on over to YouTube, search for Driveline. My YouTube handle is youtube.com/driver lineup. You'll find it there. And then in those videos, you can find the link down to the Discord. Once I get, and that's where we can have some dialogue, but once I get things up and running with this podcast, I'll have information in each episode show so that you can link out to it, and also have a new intro and exit coming in July that'll give you a little bit of information on that. If you can get into YouTube or Discord, would love to know your thoughts. Otherwise, you can hit me on X. What is my... I haven't been into my... I think I recently changed it. Okay, yeah. Driveline Live is my X username. Driveline Live, which is also the website. It's being worked on right now as of the end of May, but that'll be up soon. All right, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks so much for being patient again with the podcast as we reboot, retool, reconfigure, and get things ready for the summer and beyond of 2025. Be safe, make good decisions. As always, drive to thrive. I'll talk to you all soon.